We are exactly 1 month away from the start of the VCT 2025 season. On January 10th, the VCT China League will have its kickoff tournament begin, marking the start of what should be one of the best seasons of the VCT yet. So everybody has their predictions, what teams they think have gone a lot better, what the expectations are for a lot of teams. I talked about that in terms of the Americas expectations in my last video, but I think across the board, expectations are very high for most teams. A lot of teams invested a lot of money and a lot of time into players that they think are going to get them to internationals. However, there are only so many spots. When you really think about it, the amount of teams whittles down very quickly. We go from 48 teams potentially being able to qualify for the first international to only 8 teams attending, and then the next one is only 12, and then the last one, champions, is only 16. So while expectations are very high for a lot of teams, there are only so many spots. So who do I think are going to make those spots? We will be talking about every upcoming international tournament this year and talking about every team that I think is going to make it. Now, this is not a pick'ems video. I'm not going to be talking about the kickoff brackets quite yet because so far, at least at the time of recording, we only know the Americas kickoff bracket, but I'm not taking that into account in this video. So this is the board we have today. We have every team hidden right now, so we're going to slowly reveal them. Let's get into the teams. We will be starting with the first international tournament of the year, Masters Bangkok. Starting with the Americas teams that I think will be attending, we have up first G2. I definitely think G2 is going to get off to a good start this year. They are one of the only teams that kept basically their whole roster. They just swapped one player, and I think that that player in Jogmo is a huge upgrade for them, and I think he's going to have a really good year on G2. Yes, there are questions about the system that G2 plays, but so far in offseason events, Jogmo has fit in pretty well. And since this team made 2 out of 3 internationals last year and just kept getting better, yes, they had a bad champs, but still in the Americas, they went from looking like a mid-tier team to one of the best. So I think that with the new talent that they brought in Jogmo, they're going to be able to make it to the first international of the year. So who will be joining them in this tournament? Well, there are a lot of potential candidates. We have teams like Sentinels who, won the first tournament of last year. We have Energy, who a lot of people expect a lot from. There are a lot of high expectations for a lot of America's teams, but which one do I see taking that second spot? And just by the way, I'm predicting G2 as being the top seed, so just assume that whatever team's the farthest left in each region is the top seed. So for the Americas, I decided to go with what I think is a bit of a wildcard team because there are teams that we won't expect to be able to make it to internationals or, do very well in their own region, but will end up surprising us. Remember, Team Heretics last year, I had them last on my EMEA power ranking heading into the season, and look how that turned out. Expectations are broken all the time, and there are always surprise teams. So I decided to do that for the Americas because I think that MIBR actually have a pretty good chance of having a good start to the year. I think the one thing that might hinder this argument is the fact that MIBR have very recently formed their roster, so they haven't had as much practice as other teams. However, when you have such proven amazing talent like Ospos and Noswer, you have a pretty high chance of at least competing for these international spots. So yes, the tier 2 talent that they're bringing in are definitely big question marks. Will they be able to perform at a tier 1 level? We saw with teams like 2Game Esports in the Ascension tournament that the tier 2 players in Brazil and South America can compete with the North American players. So I do think if there's any wildcard team in the Americas, I think MIBR makes the most sense because they brought in arguably the best player in the game as well as some pretty solid talent from tier 2 as well as Noswer. So if it all clicks, I could see them beating out Energy. Yes, I know this is probably not the most likely pick. I reserve the right to change these when pick'ems come around. However, I do think MIBR have a good shot. Moving on to the EMEA region, we're going to be starting with a pretty familiar face, and that is Team Heretics. Team Heretics is just too good and too hungry of a team to miss out on any international this year. This team got so close to winning 2 internationals last year, and I think that they're going to be able to pick off where they left off and be able to finally win a grand finals in their own region. And, will they do it in an international grand final? We'll see if that comes up later, but either way, I think if they're able to break through in their own region grand finals, then I think that should be a pretty solid sign that Team Heretics would be a team that is ready to win. Moving on to team number 2, we have a team that went pretty big game hunting this offseason, and that is Team Vitality. Now, I voiced my concerns about Team Vitality during the offseason, kind of comparing them to Energy heading into 2024, where they picked up these really big pieces, but ended up really not working well together. I do question Safe as the IGL. I do question their roles in general, because Safe is definitely not going to be the main duelist if you have Durka. At least I would hope that's how it works, but Safe can play other roles. It's just he really thrives on duelists. We saw him on that last year. So while I do have my concerns and I can see this ending up being a train wreck, for now I will give them the credit that I do think this team has enough top-heavy talent and just across the board some really solid shooters and players that I think they can make it to Masters Bangkok. Moving on to the Pacific region, we have a team that fell short of expectations last year but has done a very good job in the offseason picking up some really good talent. I'm of course talking about T1. They picked up Meteor in the offseason as well as Buzz. They also grabbed Stacks from DRX about midway last season, and the rest of the roster is pretty solid as well. And I think that this team is going to be really competitive. They've had a good offseason. They've looked really good. They have some really experienced talent. I think T1 is really looking to make a name for themselves in Valorant in 2025. So I do think that they get off to a pretty good start by being the top seed in the Pacific heading into Masters Bangkok. So who will be the runner-up for them? Well, I decided that I don't think PaperX is going to make it. I think Gen G is going to be able to attend this tournament. Yes, Gen G did end up losing Meteor as well as Lakia, two losses that cannot be understated. However, with the pieces that they brought in Foxy9 and Yeoman, I think there are worse replacements out there. Yes, Foxy9's career has been pretty up and down so far overall, but I think with the coaching staff of Gen G, I think that they're in for a pretty good season, even though they don't look like the same, top team in the world as they were last year. Their offseason has been a bit up and down. They've lost some matches here and there, but I'm not taking into account those offseason events too much just yet. We'll see how they do in the Soup League. This is actually being recorded about an hour before the first match, so maybe I'll get that pointed out to me if they lose that match and just completely eat my words. But for now, I choose to have faith in Gen G. I think that they're still, even with the pieces that they lost, they still have a lot of that core that ended up winning the tournament last year. So I think that they get themselves off to a good start. Moving on to China, I believe we will be seeing some familiar faces in Edward Gaming. I think this is one pretty much a given. This is kind of a free space when it comes to China. They have been the top team in China for years, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon, especially coming off of a champs win. So in terms of who's the runner-up, I think Trace has a pretty good chance of being that runner-up. They've looked good in the offseason. They went on a decent run at champs. Yes, their playoffs didn't go as well as, they would have wanted it to, but sometimes as a team you have to go through those learning curves and those lessons to be able to be a top team in Valorant. So I do think that they have a pretty decent chance of beating out teams like FPX for that second spot. So those are the teams attending, but who's going to win that tournament? Well, if I wasn't going to get called an NA fanboy earlier, I definitely am now. I think G2 are going to be taking home the Masters Bangkok trophy. Here's my main argument. North American teams are very good at winning the first tournament of the year. We had Sentinels winning both Madrid as well as the very first tournament in Valor's history in Rankvic 2021. In between those ones, we had Optic winning 2022. So the only time that they haven't won the first tournament of the year was when we had that lock-in tournament at the start of the Franchise League, which was a much different tournament than what we usually have. Couple that with the fact that I think G2, again, is just keep getting better. They just keep getting, just that improvement that we've seen from them has just been phenomenal. I know a lot of people don't like that style of play, but it gets them wins. And if it ends up winning them a tournament, we might see a lot of other teams adopting this style. So, if you're not a fan of how they play, then definitely you're not going to want this to be the result. Moving on, we have Masters Toronto, a tournament that I will be attending. So starting with the Americas yet again, I am just going to say that, yep, G2 is going to be attending that. Don't see them pulling a Sentinels last year where they miss out on the next tournament. It is definitely possible, fatigue and being overworked and all that, reasons why Sentinels missed it, but there were teams like Heretics that were able to consistently make it to the next tournament. So I think G2 are going to be able to do it because we usually don't see the tournament winners miss out on the next tournament. I feel like that was just an unfortunate timing for Sentinels. Speaking of Sentinels, I do think that they're going to be attending Masters Toronto, so sorry Sentinels fans, you weren't making it to Bangkok, but I do think that this team will find their stride. I think they're going to have a bit of a slow start, but I think once they hit their stride, they're going to be a really dangerous team. So I do think that they will be the runners-up in America. Again, G2 as the top seed. And for the third team for Masters Toronto, I do think Energy is going to be able to make it there. I debated whether or not putting them as the second team for Bangkok, but, I also thought about Sentinels, but I also thought about, wildcard teams, which is why MIBR is there. So I do have MIBR missing out on the second tournament of the year because I do think that the teams of Sentinels and Energy are going to hit their stride, and once they do, are going to be very dangerous teams in their own region. So moving on to EMEA, we have some familiar faces showing up. Team Heretics, yet again, top seed in EMEA. Maybe they end up being the runner-up this time, or maybe third place or whatever, but I do think that they attend. As well as the old friends in Vitality joining yet again. I was thinking of, not doing the same teams for each region showing up all the time because, especially in 2024, we saw, especially for the Americas teams, we saw a lot of teams, attend one tournament, then not attend the next. 100 Thieves is a great example of that. But I do feel like for the most part of Valorant's history, we see a lot of the same teams at every tournament of 1 year, especially when it comes to teams at the top of these regions. So I do think if Vitality are able to, have a good start to their season, that they're going to be able to carry that into qualifying for Toronto. Then moving on to the third team, we do have Fnatic. So I'm just going to say right here, I don't have a lot of faith in Fnatic this year, and I'm not just saying that because Kojo was mean to me on Twitter, but I'm mostly saying that because it just seems like this roster is kind of sunsetting when it comes to being a top team in the EMEA League and just Valorant in general. Losing Durka, I think, is really going to hurt them, and I just don't understand that decision from an org perspective. Yes, Kayak should be a good replacement, but he seems to get the jitters when he's playing on LAN, so if he can fix that, then this team should be good, and I am assuming that they're going to be good, and I am assuming that Kayak is going to fix that about him. So I do have them as the third seed, but I'm just going to tell you right now, I am not picking them to win either of the last two tournaments here. But are they good enough to continue to make it to internationals? Yes, I do believe that. So moving on to Pacific, we have T1 showing up yet again, and I think, again, they will be the top seeds. Joining them as the runner-up is PaperX, so I do have PaperX missing out on the first tournament of the year, which would break their streak of attending tournaments. I have wanted PaperX to win an international tournament for quite some time, and I have said in past videos that I will not be picking them to win any tournament going forward. They've let me down too many times. So hey, maybe coming in as underdogs will end up being favorable for them, but I kind of feel the same as I do about them as I do Fnatic, but at least Fnatic has won trophies. But I think that this roster, while still just full of talent and still has the talent to be able to win a tournament, but I just don't see it happening, and I think we start to slowly see the downfall of them. I would love to be proven wrong, absolutely, but PaperX as the runner-up, so hey, they actually have a decent stage 1 is what I'm predicting. Joining them as the third team, I think Gen G is able to make it there, but they just fall short of making it to the grand finals of their region. Moving on to China, we of course have EDG showing up once again. For the runner-up in China, we do have FPX making their return to that number 2 spot. FPX for some time has been the second best team in China for a minute, just always gets overshadowed by EDG, and they typically don't have great performances at internationals, but they usually at least make it there. I'm just not picking them to make Bangkok. And then for number 3, we do have Trace making it yet again. I do think that, they are going to continue their pretty strong play in their own region. So those are all 12 teams that will be making it to Toronto in my eyes. So what team is the winner? Well, it is North America, so I'm a North American shill. It's going to be another North American team. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be Team Heretics. Team Heretics made it to multiple grand finals last year, including Champs, the biggest tournament of the year. Their kryptonite last year seemed to be grand finals. Whatever the context was, a grand finals just did not go well for them, whether it was in region or at internationals. So I'm predicting them to get over that hump in their own region, lose in Bangkok, but then being able to take everything that they've learned and just be like, enough is enough, we're winning. And I'm going to be there to watch live, so really hope that that is what happens, because it would be great to see this team finally get over the hump that they've had for quite a bit now. Plus, they've kept the same roster from last year, and I don't see a reason why this team should fall off next year. But we have seen teams that have kept the same roster for a while start to fall off, but I think Heretics have a chance to break that trend. Moving on, we have Champions Paris. So what teams are going to make the 16-team tournament? Attending out of the Americas, the top seed, I think, is going to be Energy. I think Energy have some really good talent. They have a really good coach, plus it is FNS's last year in professional Valorant. So I think when it comes to being motivated to not only make it to Toronto, I think him making it to Paris, to champions in his final tournament in his VCT career. I think we're going to see him do everything he possibly can to get them there. Plus, I think Energy have enough talent to get there and to do pretty well at the tournament. As the runner-up, we have Sentinels coming back once again. I don't think we're going to see Sentinels miss out on too much international play this year. Yes, they lost Tens and Saucy, but still, this is a really solid team. As a third seed, we have G2 kind of taking it a bit more lax during stage 2, already building up those champions points from making it to Toronto and probably doing pretty well there, and also, winning Bangkok. So maybe taking a bit more of a lax approach. So for the fourth team, this one definitely took a lot of thinking about the Brazilian teams and MIBR, making it to Bangkok. Are they going to be able to make it to Paris after not doing well enough to make it to Toronto? But as we know, there is one team that seems to always be at champions, and that's is Crew. I debated whether or not to put Crew here because I'm like, how long can this streak of making it to champions possibly go? But I am going to say for the 5th champions in a row, Crew ends up making it there. Sometimes there are things in sports and esports that are just constant weird things that always happen, and I think Crew making it to champions is going to continue, even though I think there are better teams that we could see there. But I do like Crew a lot, so I think it would be cool to see them there. Plus, they have a pretty solid roster. I think they have the ability to make it there as well, and potentially make it to the first 2 tournaments of the year. Moving on to the EMEA team, some familiar faces yet again. We have Team Vitality being the top seed this time, being really motivated to do well heading into Paris, their home turf. They are a French organization. As the runner-up, we have Heretics, not winning that grand final this time, but still making it there. For the 3rd seed, we do have Carmine Corp, so I decided to give a bit of love to the French teams for this prediction. As you can see, I do not have Carmine Corp making either of the first 2 tournaments. I do have my concerns when it comes to the roster, even though they did pick up some very solid talent, especially with Sadok. Their offseason has been up and down. Again, I'm not trying to take the offseason into too much account because, again, offseason events don't really matter at the end of the day. But I do think that compared to the other teams, it is going to take a minute for Carmine Corp to really hit their stride, and Paris is the focus because, again, as a French organization, especially Carmine Corp, who are huge in France, they are really going to be motivated to make it to Paris. So I do think that them as the 3rd seed makes sense. Which means the 4th seed will be Fnatic. Again, I don't see them missing out on a champions, much like Crew. They make it to every single one. So I think we'll see them there. Sometimes we just see familiar faces. Moving on to Pacific. As the number 1 seed, yet again, we have T1 taking it. So I'm having T1 just dominate within their own region. As the runner-up, we will have Gen G reclaiming that spot, which they had in Bangkok, but they did not have heading into Toronto. And for the 3rd seed for Pacific, I do think that the team coming up from Ascension in non-Shim Red Force have a pretty solid chance of making it here. Again, I was trying to think of wildcard teams, what teams could we see surprise the most, and there was a lot of praise for how Sin Priza Gaming were playing in that Ascension tournament. They have, of course, been purchased by non-Shim Red Force, so I hope I'm saying that right. But I think based off of what I've heard about that team and how that tournament went for that team, I think that they're pretty solid and should be able to, show that these Ascension teams can compete really well and make it to champions. I think that's pretty fair for a wildcard team, which means the 4th seed will end up being Paper X. Again, same thing about Paper X. They're good enough to make it to these tournaments, but they just can't seem to win them. Moving on to the China League, I actually have the top seed changing this time. Trace Esports takes away that number 1 spot from EDG. Listen, I don't think EDG is going to be the number 1 team in China forever. There will be a changing of the guard at some point. Not that it's just going to happen in one bracket, but I do see a team like Trace being able to jump up and take that number 1 spot heading into champs. But I do have them as the 2nd seed at the very least. They're good enough to make it to grand finals. We will see them there. As the 3rd seed, I decided to go with FPX again here. I do think, again, they're probably going to attend these international tournaments, just not do very well at them probably. And for the 4th seed, I decided to go with a bit of a wild card. I thought about teams like Billy, but they usually make it to champs, but I don't know if they will this year. But I do think it'd be kind of cool to see Wolves there, wouldn't it? This is a team that Thinking Man's Valorant would probably be very happy to see at champs this year, so if you're watching TMV, this one's for you. But beyond the memes, I've heard good things about this roster. Don't know too much about the Chinese teams, but Wolves, maybe they have that ability to be that 4th seed. So those are all the teams that will be qualifying for every international this season. Guaranteed. This is me looking into the future. This is not a prediction. This is me telling you what's gonna happen. I am the Messiah. I am God. No, I'm just kidding. But in terms of which team is going to take away the Champions Trophy, the crown jewel of Valorant in 2025, who is it going to be? In my humble and always correct opinion, T1 is going to be the team that takes Champions 2025. Couple reasons for this pick. T1, I think, is very good. They have an incredible depth of talent, a very solid roster, and Pacific, at the time of making this video, are the only league that has not won a Champions Trophy in the VCT yet. They didn't even win a Masters until Gen G in 2024, so I think that this is where we officially see that change. I think T1 have the talent to do it. They're going to show dominance in their own region. They're going to do well at these internationals, but they're not going to be able to win one until the one that matters the most, the Champions Trophy. And that is how we will end the VCT 2025 season. So this is my way too early predictions video for the VCT 2025 season. Let me know in the comment section down below what your way too early predictions are and how wrong do you think I'm going to be. Let me know what you think of these predictions in the comment section down below. I will be doing pick'ems videos for the kickoff tournaments when all the brackets are released. I'm going to wait a couple weeks for those ones so that it's a bit more closer to the actual start of the tournaments, but either way you will see those and the predictions might change by then. Again, I'm reserving the right to change these opinions and these predictions. So please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.